All right. And I'd like to welcome to the stage Victor Hernandez Stumpfhauser, composer of Frida. It's a pleasure. Either one's fine. And also, I'd like to thank on stage and welcome producer Laura Pilloni. Wow, so that film left goosebumps. I feel like I know a lot more about Frida Kahlo. It was a very intimate film. So I wanted to start off with the images and the combination of the artwork, animation, the videos, and photography. And really with the first phrase that we see on the screen, Frida Kahlo left a rich testimony in her life in letters, writings, and her illustrated diary. Tell us how this film started with the way you wanted to tell this narrative.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, by the way, for having us here. We're very excited. This is our first time in Houston, so this is we're so happy to share the film with y'all. So thanks so much for coming and having us here. So yeah, to talk about the visuals. So Carla Gutierrez, who's our director, she actually has been editing documentaries for some time now, but this is her first time directing. And I've worked with her in the past when she's editing, and I have known that she just always has like a really strong vision of where she wants to take things. And it was always the vision of this film to tell the story through Frida's words. And so we knew that we were gonna have to do a lot of research to find everything under the sun that we could in terms of her words and her letters and her interviews. But in terms of the images, I mean, I think it really just started coming together when we started putting the voice down and started thinking of that narrative and finding the images that would represent what Frida was feeling during the really important moments of her life. She, painted throughout her whole life, but definitely like some of these paintings she did much later on, and we actually show them earlier, right? So we didn't really go chronologically with her paintings. We really just tried to lead with emotion. What is the emotion of this scene? What are the paintings that represent that? So that was a little bit about how we basically chose like the visuals that you see.
And I also had to see the credits twice because the narrator who's doing the voice of Frida sounded a lot like Salma Hayek. Was that intentional?
No, it was not. So we actually, I know way too much about Frida. So I know something that maybe not a lot of people know, which is that there is no recording of Frida's voice available. There was some fake news going around a few years ago where it was said, like, oh, we found like Frida reading, some poetry or something. And then somebody came out and was like, no, that's my grandma, guys. This is not Frida Kahlo. I don't know where you got this information from. And what we did have, though, is Hayden Herrera was this woman who in the 70s was just writing a thesis. She was an art historian, and she was writing her thesis, and in the 70s, there was not a lot known about Frida. The Frida mania, you could even say, kind of got started because of Hayden's book that she wrote. And what she did in the 70s is that she interviewed a lot of people that knew Frida, because in the 70s they were still alive. Frida died in her 40s, so in the 70s they still, she was able to track down so many people like Alejandro, the boyfriend that she had, and she asked them, what did Frida's voice sound like? And so that's the only thing that we had to go by. And what we knew is that there was a little bit of raspiness, which makes sense because she smoked a lot. And, but also people said it had like a musical sort of tone at the same time. And we had, you worked with the amazing casting director who, you know, we did the casting in Mexico, and when Fernanda's voice came in, we thought like she really not only captured, obviously like the raspiness is there, but what Carla really wanted to show was, yes, the strength of this woman, but also the vulnerability that we're trying to show in this film, which maybe not a lot of people know about. And then also just like her passion for life and her curiosity that's youthful even in her later years. So we think Fernanda did such an amazing job with it. But cool, she sounds like Salma, I guess.
A lot. And on the topic of like music, you were just mentioning this question's for Victor. So the sound is so rich and textured that the audience is pulled into this world. So we're very much a part of Frida's world. What were some of your influences as far as like the sounds and the choices you made for the film?
Well, I'll start saying that Carla wanted, from the very beginning, she mentioned she wanted a sense of modern music. You know, that's how she laid it out, in the sense that she didn't want archival music. She didn't necessarily want it music that was specific of the era. And the reason was because, you know, Frida being such a modern figure in her time, so ahead of her time with her ideas. And so that was like our starting point to try to find the sound. And I have to say I went maybe a little too far at the beginning with my experimentation. And none of it really, a lot of it didn't end up in the film, but in a way, you know, we tried so many things. I did so many different kinds of modern approaches till at one point we came back to something, and one of these things was that Carla said that aside from giving me a bunch of playlists, really cool playlists that she put together with all these great Latin American singers, female singers, she mentioned that she thought that if Frida were alive today, maybe she would have liked cumbia, you know? That cumbia would have probably been a great, you know, something that she would have enjoyed. So that became a big influence for some of the sequences, together with many other elements. But like, for example, the sequence when she's in school and the cachuchas with the gang and all that, that was one of the first sequences where I worked on, like, on a cumbia vibe, and Carla immediately loved that. You know, she was like, "Yes, that's Frida. Frida likes that. That's what it is. Keep going at that." And eventually, you know, there's a very wide spectrum of emotions and sounds, but that's one big element that we worked on.
Because I know your background also is as a pianist. Was there ever a moment in the film where you said, "Why don't I add a few chords from the piano?"
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yes. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I was doing like all this neoclassical stuff, you know, that I thought, well, this is modern and this can work, but it definitely didn't work for Carla, and now I agree. It was a whole process experimenting. But yeah, there's a lot of keyboards, there's a lot of course there's guitar, because at one point we were like, we need to tap into Mexican folk, you know, in a certain way. And so I brought back some guitar, acoustic guitar, and then some electronics. There's a lot of electronics, a lot of sampling of my own music, just to give it like that modern sort of feel, but still rooted in some Mexican flair.
Thank you. And we want to open it up for the audience. If you have any questions for either of them. Yes.
Why do you think Frida's story needs to be told over and over again?
Thank you. So I think Carla, and I only know this because I've been to so many Q&As when Carla is asked similar questions. But Carla knew that, because Carla is like obsessed with Frida, because she's, as a college student, just really got into her artwork and then had read the Hayden Herrera book. She knew that there hasn't really been any telling of her story documented on film that really just leads with her voice, right? And I know now, because I've been doing research, watched a lot of these films, a lot of the times it's like what we call talking heads, where it's like art historians just talking about their opinion, or yeah, maybe people that knew her sort of, you know, giving like their take on what had happened in her life. But there, and I know this also from looking for her words, there also isn't one collection of her letters, like in a book. And definitely not in film. So we actually had to do that work. There were so many, not only books where we found a lot of like interviews, also like, you know, newspaper articles that had her words, but also we found letters that had never been even scanned yet in museums in like Washington, D.C., and like museums in Mexico City. And Hayden actually got a lot of the letters that Frida wrote to Alejandro. She had the scans of them because she gave them to him in the 70s to scan so that she could reference for her book. And there were a few things that I could tell, like, oh, the book that thinks they published the Frida letters to Alejandro, actually they are publishing the drafts that Frida would write and that Frida kept, because we have from Alejandro like the actual letters that were sent out, which like are a little different, not like crazy different, but like I could tell now, I'm like, oh, this is like something that has never actually been published. So I think, you know, just in terms of doing it differently, I think this is the approach that makes this unique. But also, I think people are just drawn to Frida for so many reasons, and I think it goes beyond her being, like, I'm looking at your shirt, right, and just like her just kind of being iconic and being everywhere, and it's something that we talk a lot about, and we, you know, Carla has always thought is, you know, Frida is this strong person that went through a lot, but she was also very vulnerable, and we see it because it's in her painting, right? She's like, here's my pain, I am going through it, I'm not like this strong, unbreakable person, and I think people really can relate to that. So it's just something that people are drawn to and go back to over and over again.
Yes, that's exactly how Frida feels throughout. I feel like she shows her vulnerability through her paintings. I feel like it makes people feel more comfortable to feel vulnerability, you know? I feel her pain. I feel through her paintings is the vulnerability that she felt back then.
Yeah, and the hope is now that you also get to hear from her, not just like see it in her paintings, but actually like see where she was coming from when she was having those emotions.
Yes.
Yes.
So I saw that Ron Howard was a producer for this movie. So can you comment on the interest of the non-Latino interest in Frida?
Yeah, definitely. So this film was a co-production of Time Studios and Imagine Entertainment. So Ron Howard, I believe, works with Imagine Entertainment. And the reason why I say I believe is because I was part of the core creative team, which was made of Latino filmmakers, led by Carla. And I actually didn't talk to any of the EPs ever. This film was really made by Carla and the team that she put together. We just got really lucky that we were able to have producing partners come on board very early on to support it in a way that allowed us to just focus on the creative process, because I come from independent documentary. I've never worked with bigger production companies as I did on Frida, and I'm, you know, just used to fundraising, and a lot of the time it gets in the way of getting to be creative. So what this allowed us to do, for better or for worse, is really just be able to focus with our creative core team, just having these like bigger names, sort of saying like, oh, this, this sounds like a good idea. We trust Carla with her vision. You have the green light, go ahead. We were really lucky from then on to just be able to just really tell the story in the way that we felt it needed to be told.
So any influence by them on the story? They're going to give you that freedom to...
Yeah, great question. I would say not so much. And I would say, in some, I mean, obviously they were, supportive and like, yeah, keep going. But I think it just goes to show like how amazing Carla is at just getting people on board with her vision. She gets everyone in the room excited about what she wants to do. And even if you're like, oh, I don't really know if this is gonna work, she's just so excited about it that you just like believe her and you go along with it and it works. And I think just how she did that for us so many times creatively, I'm sure she was doing it for like our bigger executives. Because, there is definitely, just, I think, apprehensions in the industry right now about how, I mean, just like, perfect example is like, there was a time where it was discussed like, will we tell the story in English? And we definitely didn't want to tell the story in English. This is Frida's words and they're in Spanish. But we, those apprehensions came to us, and I think Carla is just such a great team player and collaborator, and she is just really good at like slowly convincing people to do things her way. And yeah, you heard it, it's in Spanish.
Yes.
Hi. How long did it take for you guys to like research music-wise? Like how long did it take to compose this film? And like research them, because you said like you had the personal letters from Frida to like
Yeah, so I'll talk about the research. I'm sure he will
In
talk
terms
about
of
music.
music, it was, well, not more than a year. It was, let's say, I would say about 6 months, roughly, which was last year, yeah. So I finished my part. When was that deadline that we had? Late November, sometime late November, and then maybe like 6 to 8 months going backwards, whatever that is. Yeah.
And we were talking about this over drinks while you guys were watching the film. But documentary, because you have more of a narrative background, and documentary is so different because unlike when you get the finished film and it's like, here, compose a score for it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally like building the thing together without a script. And we don't know what it's gonna look like at the end. Like there's definitely like a vision of like what drives it, but you really don't know what it's gonna look like at the end. And it just goes to show how, talented and flexible Victor was throughout the whole process, because I mean, I don't even know, like, there were some crazy scenes that we had in there that like never made it in. I think like what you got is the most polished, like best version, but there were some scenes in there that were, what scene I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure, the process, I guess there were some very rough sequences where none of the animation was done yet. So it was just like a slide, just a picture of the image and just still, and there were a lot of those, and so it was a little rough to sort of envision how this is going to evolve, but we had to be creative, and I think in a way, as I was delivering music, I think that fed also the animators, as in like that helped them also. So there was a point when we were sort of helping each other, and in the end it was just like a puzzle, everything building up together. But yeah, like she said, I've worked in other projects where I get a film at the very end, it's been shot, it's been edited, and now it just needs music and a little bit of post-production. So it's a different thing, you get the whole thing, and yeah, the whole process is a little different, how to work on it. And but this was also, it was a challenge, but a very cool challenge.
And then in terms of the research, just like a quick overview, I guess, of like the timeline, maybe like 2 years before it was done, Carla and our lead producer, Katya McGuire, were just absorbing all the books that they could. And then we came in a year and a half before the end, and did research, just gathering, as much as we could. The idea was maybe for like the first 6 months, but even as we were editing, which Carla edited the film, but even as we were editing, some of these museums would take so long to get us like one scan, and Carla would be like, oh, but that letter is from this date. I bet she's talking about this like one thing that we need. And so we'd go to the museum like, can you please, like, just like take a picture of it and send it to us, and we'll like, because they would be like, oh, first we have to like, transcribe it, and then we have to translate it, and we're like, we all speak Spanish in this team, like just send us the picture. And anyway, so yeah, it was like just a longer process. I think the research then, it was longer than I think we all anticipated, but it was also, because it took a while to like really come together, to really get all the letters in, it was also very nerve-wracking, because we actually weren't 100% sure if we were going to be able to tell the story with just Frida leading. We were like, putting it together as we went along, and I think maybe like around April of basically like 6 or 7 months before we were like, ready to show it at the festival, we were like, oh, it's happening. Like, she's really telling her story, and she's really, Carla likes to say, kicking characters out of the way and saying, let me tell it, because we did have a lot more supporting characters than you hear here, that we thought we were gonna have to lean into, and Frida was like, no, I got this. I'll tell you my story.
Yes.
So you managed to do all this archival research. One thing that I'm curious about is her parents and her siblings, and the rest of her family thought about what she was doing at the stage of her life. So that didn't make it to the film. So I'm curious if you had some tips to share.
I'm sorry, what was,
Your question was in regard to like the siblings?
Yes, the parents and siblings.
The parents and siblings?
oh, that like we kind of didn't follow them in the film? Is that the question?
Because you managed to do the archival research, I'm curious whether you had some tidbit to share about what they thought of her at different stages as she was going through this.
Oh, what her family thought of her throughout the stages of her life.
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, there's like so much more that we know. So like, that couldn't make it into the film for, we have an hour and a half to tell the story. And like I said, Carla really likes to like lead with emotion. But we actually have a lot of, and this is actually that museum in DC called the National Museum of Women, the Women Arts, something like that, NMWA. They have so many letters, not only that Frida wrote to her family, but that they wrote to her. So, there's, a lot, I guess, that we could like delve into, and that I think people should, and that's actually a hope that we have with the film, that people would get interested in, and try to do a deep dive further than what's usually out there. But I guess in terms of just like what her family thought, her family wasn't really, I think, that impressed. She was still just a sister. She was still, someone that, they would be like, hey, can you, bring me shoes next time you go to New York or something. Like, I'm about to go travel to see family next week, and last weekend was getting shoes for my family. So it's just, she's just, I don't think they really saw her as like a big celebrity. And the thing is that a lot of people actually in Mexico only really saw her as a celebrity during her lifetime because she was married to Diego.
Right.
It wasn't really she wasn't really recognized for her art like she is now. I mean, it depends on who you talk to, but I think so many more people are more familiar with her art now than they are with Diego's art, and it was like totally the opposite when they were alive.
And I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A portion, but I wanted to thank both of you for coming to Houston and showing us this wonderful film of Frida. Thank you to Laura Pilloni and Victor Hernandez Stumpfhauser. Thank you so much.
Thank you.